The next item of business is topical questions, and I call Stephen Kerr.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will update the Parliament on the supply and availability of the flu vaccine.
Minister Jenny Minto.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Government has procured ample vaccines for the free national programme, allowing us to vaccinate the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation advised groups, notably those aged 65 and over and the clinically at risk. I encourage those eligible who haven't been vaccinated to come forward before the programme ends on the 31st of March. The Scottish Government is not responsible for private flu vaccination services for those groups outside the national programme, but our national supplier has confirmed they have supplies of vaccine for the under 65 age group available for purchase. This has been communicated to Community Pharmacy Scotland.
Stephen Kerr.
Well, let me welcome some of the things that the Minister has said in reply to my question. And the pertinence of this question is borne out by last week's FMQs, when the First Minister repeated quite often that there was an exceptionally high level of flu and that we were being told that our hospitals are at breaking point. We were also being told, and I think this is borne out by anecdotal evidence as supplied by my constituents, that while vaccine demand is high, it is being outstripped by supply, by the available supply in pharmacies right across Scotland. They can't get hold of a vaccine anywhere, no matter how hard they search. So if, as the Minister says, there is no shortage of vaccines in the NHS and no restriction in supply, will she follow the example of the Northern Ireland Executive and the strong advice of Joseph Carter, the head of Asthma and Lung UK Scotland, and release the surplus stock of vaccine to the wider general public immediately?
Minister.
I thank Stephen Kerr for his question and appreciate his recognition that I noted that there aren't shortages of stocks within Scotland. We asked the National Services to do the check and ensure that they were there. With regard to the Northern Ireland decision, I have had discussions with my officials regarding that, but the clear advice that I have had is to continue following the JCVI advice because the best results from a clinical perspective come to those who are most in need, and that is the cohorts that I've spoken about earlier, the over 65s.
Stephen Kerr.
Let me continue to focus on the wider public interest, because a lot of members of the public are getting the message that they should seek a flu vaccine. It was Adam Osprey from Community Pharmacy Scotland who was reporting the demand outstripping supply in community pharmacies. And there's little wonder for this, because it's a fact that the criteria for qualifying for the flu vaccine this year was changed. And the pharmacies couldn't have known the new criteria had changed, there was a new criteria, when they ordered their annual stock of JAGs, because the government never told the community pharmacies about the new eligibility criteria. So why were the eligibility criteria for the NHS vaccine changed, making it inevitable that there would be additional demand on the pharmacies without any joined-up coordination with the pharmacies? Isn't this just another example of why people can't trust the SNP with the NHS? Isn't this simply a continuation of the pattern of incompetence we see from the SNP when it comes to health?
Minister.
I thank the Presiding Officer. I would refute exactly what Stephen Kerr has just said. We have been listening to the experts, the JCVI, with regard to the appropriate cohorts to be vaccinated in Scotland. Now, this eligibility criteria and the information is routinely published. It's published on the government website. The Scottish Chief Medical Officer writes a letter, which also is published. It is also published on NHS Inform, which is, I think, incredibly important. Now, my Chief Pharmaceutical Officer and myself meet regularly with Community Pharmacy Scotland, and at the meetings that I've had with them, from my recollection, this has never been raised as an issue. However, at my next meeting, I am very content to have that conversation with Community Pharmacy, because as I referenced in my response to a question last week, community pharmacists are absolutely key and integral to ensure that Scotland gets through any winter crisis within, and I think the role that they carry out is incredibly important, and I'm very thankful for what they do.
Thank you. Emma Harper.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It is clear that there has been an increased concern, not just in Scotland but across the UK, regarding the rise in the level of flu infections in all age groups in recent weeks. And it is not too late to take a vaccine. Can the Minister outline what work the Scottish Government and stakeholders are conducting to encourage an increased uptake in the flu vaccination?
Minister.
I thank Emma Harper for her question and agree with her that we should be promoting vaccinations. Partners have been heavily promoting flu vaccination to eligible groups over December and January. Boards are offering a mixture of drop-in clinics where there is no need to book, and bookable appointments as well for maximum ease of access for people. Many citizens accessed flu vaccinations over the festive period, with boards expanding their clinic offering to meet increased demand. Last week, boards delivered over 16,000 flu vaccinations compared to 7,400 in the equivalent week in January 2024. Since the 26th of December, the First Minister has chaired a series of meetings with senior leaders across NHS Scotland to ensure not only that action was taken to make sure people could easily access flu vaccines, but that the system as a whole was working together in the face of significant pressures.
Thank you. Jackie Baillie.
The First Minister has pointed to the flu outbreak as the reason for the crisis in our hospitals this winter. But it is little wonder when you consider that the flu programme this year is operating at least a month later than the programme in either of the last 2 years. So vaccinations are later, uptake much lower, and consequently thousands fewer people have been vaccinated as a result. Some GPs, particularly in NHS Highland, have called for vaccinations to return to being delivered by GPs themselves. Can I ask the Minister whether she would support such a move?
Minister.
I thank Jackie Baillie for her question and recognise, as I think I answered to her maybe 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, that we need different solutions perhaps for different areas. I live in Argyll and Bute, and within my area of NHS Highland there is that flexibility, but I'm pleased to be able to say that the Cabinet Secretary has written to NHS Highland today, and if the member has any further questions about vaccine availability and location, then I know officials would be very happy to speak to you.
Fergus Ewing.
Presiding Officer, for nigh on 3 years I've campaigned with 3 Health Secretaries and 3 First Ministers to restore to GPs vaccination services, providing a safer system at much lower cost and a local service for the Highlands, not a metropolitan centralised model. I'm pleased that it sounds as though there is good news at long last, and I thank the Health Secretary for that, and it will help to save further loss of life. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary if there is now to be this transfer, A, will it be swift, and B, will he be willing to meet with myself in person with Highland GPs, perhaps in Inverness, but also have a virtual meeting so that those GPs who are spread around the whole of the Highlands would be able also to contribute their views about how best to make this system work?
Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I hope Mr Ewing will allow me to answer the question on behalf of the Cabinet Secretary, but also recognise the work that he has been doing to promote this and find solutions for this situation. As I indicated to Ms Baillie, the Cabinet Secretary has written to NHS Highland today, and I know that the Cabinet Secretary would be very happy to engage with you and will write further to you to ensure that that engagement happens.
Thank you. That concludes topical questions. Point of order, Stephen Kerr.
I seek your guidance on what I think you will agree is a serious matter. On November the 14th, I asked the Cabinet Secretary for Health and Social Care if contemporaneous notes existed for all of his ministerial engagements, which involved watching Aberdeen Football Club. He said, and I quote, "There are and will be summaries of the discussions that have taken place, which is in accordance with the ministerial code," unquote. However, the Sunday Post is in possession of a Freedom of Information response that makes it clear that this isn't true. Clearly, the Cabinet Secretary has provided information to Parliament that is inaccurate, whether intentionally or otherwise. Have you been approached by the Cabinet Secretary to make a correction to the official report? Or has he asked for time to make a statement to Parliament? And what powers do you have as presiding officer to sanction a member who has evidentially made a false statement to this chamber?
Thank you, Mr Kerr. Members are aware that the content of contributions is not normally a matter for the Chair to rule on. It is a matter of paramount importance that members, including ministers, give accurate and truthful information to the Parliament, correcting any inadvertent errors at the earliest opportunity. And if a member has a question about the factual accuracy of another member's contribution, they can, of course, raise it directly with that member. And the Chamber is aware that the Parliament has a corrections procedure and how that mechanism operates. We will now move on. Point of order, Neil Bibb.
Further to that point of order, Presiding Officer, I would like to raise a point of order concerning Standing Orders 13.1 and 13.2. On the 14th of November, I asked the Cabinet Secretary for Health, Neil Gray, to publish minutes showing what issues were discussed for all, and not just the majority of the matches that he used the Scottish Government car service to attend. In response to my question, Mr Gray said there will be a note available on what was discussed. In answer to Mr Kerr, he said summaries will be available for all the engagements that I have been participating. As we've heard, the subsequent Freedom of Information releases from the Scottish Government have not provided summary notes for all the events in question. Presiding Officer, the attendance of ministers at sports events, where appropriate, should be supported by the Government. I have never questioned that. The question I asked in November was whether the correct rules and protocols were followed by the Cabinet Secretary. The question today, however, is about the apparent inconsistency between what Mr Gray told Parliament and what the Government has published. There is a significant risk here of a perception that the Cabinet Secretary may have misled this Parliament, and the situation at present cannot be allowed to stand. Over 2 months have passed and the official report has not been updated, Presiding Officer. Given the amount of time that has passed, it is my view that Mr Gray should therefore give a further statement to explain this glaring inconsistency. Can you confirm, Presiding Officer, that under Rule 13.1 a member can request a personal statement, and under Rule 13.2 a ministerial statement can be requested? And can you confirm both of those avenues are available to Mr Gray to either clarify his own remarks or confirm whether the Government is deliberately withholding information he stated would be available?
Thank you. Mr Bibby is correct with regards to both 13.1 and 13.2, and if such a request were to be received, I would certainly consider it. We will now move on to the next item of business, which is a debate on motion 16160 in the name of Shirley-Ann Somerville on compensation for WASPy women, and I'd be grateful if members who wish to speak in the debate were to press their request to speak buttons. And I call on Shirley-Ann Somerville to speak to and move the motion. Up to 15 minutes, Cabinet Secretary. Point of order, Jeremy Balfour.
I don't think the buttons are working, so we can indicate that we want to speak. Oh, it is now.
I can certainly see them on my screen. Okay. Thank you. No, thank you, Mr Balfour, for raising that. We'll certainly keep an eye on that. Thank you.